outside, warm and sun's out. So guys, toss the jackets for the day. Let's say a blessing, prayer before we start.
Thank you, Lord.
Bless us today, dear
God, we appreciate
Lord,
you.
let us get what you want from this Sunday school lesson this
Lord, we
morning.
worship
Heart
you.
of our mind, in Jesus'
God,
name.
we
Lord, bless us today, dear God.
touch our
This Sunday
minds,
this
our
morning and
hearts,
the
Lord.
services to follow, dear
Serve
God.
God.
I praise your name this morning, Jesus. Hallelujah, 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 Jesus. I worship your name, God. I praise your name, Jesus. Lord, let your presence fill this place today, God. Lord, have your way in Jesus' name.
Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. All right, topic for the day is reflecting holiness. Don't worry, we don't get into too much description. We're mostly reflecting on the inner holiness. Our focus thought for today is because God makes us holy, we must live a life that reflects holiness. Our lesson text for the day is 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 13 through 16. Reads, "Wherefore gird up the loins of your mind, be sober, and hope to the end for the grace that is to be brought unto you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. As obedient children, not fashioning yourselves according to the former lusts in your ignorance. But as he which hath called you is holy, so be ye holy in all manner of conversation, because it is written, Be ye holy, for I am holy." We're going to use the text Numbers chapter 14, verses 1 through 9. "And all the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron. And the whole congregation said unto them, Would God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would God we had died in this wilderness? And wherefore hath the Lord brought us unto this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be a prey? Were it not better for us to return into Egypt? And they said one to another, Let us make a captain, and let us return into Egypt. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the children of Israel. And Joshua the son of Nun, and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, which were of them that searched the land, rent their clothes. And they spake unto all the company of the children of Israel, saying, The land which we passed through to search it is an exceeding good land. If the Lord delight in us, then he will bring us into this land and give it us, a land which floweth with milk and honey. Only rebel not ye against the Lord, neither fear ye the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their defense is departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Fear them not." We have a cultural connection story, and the question is hacked or holy? Don't know who to blame for the technological frustrations these days? Blame the Russian hackers. While hackers from the Eastern Hemisphere might be a standing joke, the reality of Russian interference in creating fake websites and hacking into various elements of information technology in various countries has been no laughing matter. Governments do what they please if it is in their own best interests, it seems. Perhaps spies from other countries also use similar methods. Being a victim of hacking leaves one with an unsettled feeling. We want to be able to trust others better, to feel secure and untampered with. Thank you. Okay,
Tampered with.
thank you. Still lost my spot. Let me start over on that. Sorry, I lost my train of thinking there and my place. We're talking about hacked or holy. I'm talking about the Russian hackers. It says, being a victim of hacking leaves one with an unsettled feeling. We want to be able to trust others better, to feel secure and untampered with. On a different level and in a different way, this is why rape and molestation are so abhorrent to humans. Our own body is our personal space. No one should invade that. Thus, everyone has a natural instinct for holiness. While government hackers tap away at keyboards, another concern is more present in citizens' minds: home invasion. The body of the believer is devoted to the Lord. The enemy should not be allowed to hack into the files, mind and earth, or vandalize the house, use it for his liking. Apostolics should be more defensive of their bodies and minds than Americans are of their governments, elections, and websites. Only God should be authorized to inhabit and make changes in his temple. On contemplation of this topic, after over 400 years of slavery, they were free. Pharaoh gave the order to let them go and let them be. Perhaps on the march out of Egypt, and one of the Israelites thought back to a bedtime story his grandfather told him about a very distant grandfather named Abraham, who had lived hundreds of years earlier. God promised Abraham, "Lift your eyes now and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward. For all the land which you see I give to you and your descendants forever. And I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if a man could number the dust of the earth, then your descendants also could be numbered. Arise, walk in the land through its length and its width, for I give it to you." Genesis chapter 13, verses 14 through 17. For those who still held out hope while baking bricks under Egypt's blazing sun, they knew they would not be slaves forever. God had prepared a land he had promised Abraham and his descendants, and God performed on that very promise the night Israel walked free out of Egypt. And as Moses and the nation soon realized, the greatest threat to return to Egypt was not from without, it was from within. I'm just going to go ahead and say it because it went through my mind and I haven't thought of it in a while. I don't know if you've ever heard the story told of how an animal in captivity, I believe it's possibly elephants is one of them, and then another one is animals that have been caged all of their life. With doves, if they are raised in a caged environment, they won't ever know how to fly unless they're taught to fly. They have to actually be taken out of that environment and forced to fly. With elephants, the story is that they can place a chain, I believe it's elephants, a chain around their ankle. And they'll stabilize that chain to where it gives them a certain range of motion. But then after a period of time, they can remove that chain, and that animal will always stay in the perimeters that it's been in because they've already got that mindset. So with the Israelites, they had that mindset. And somehow I was never able to get out of that mindset. They didn't have a Holy Ghost like we have today that can break that. But that's the sad side on this story as far as that goes. But that last statement is what reminded me of that. It said that their greatest threat to go back to Egypt was our own selves. We're talking about how God delivered Israel out of Egypt. The book of Exodus is written like a highlight reel. Some of God's most memorable miracles are recorded in Exodus. He plagued Egypt with 10 plagues, parted the Red Sea for his people to pass, drowned the Egyptian army in the Red Sea, and inscribed 10 commandments on tables of stone with his own finger. God clearly fought for Israel and against nations who fought against him because he wanted to bring Israel safely to the promised land. Their journey from the Red Sea to the Jordan River was filled with victories, great and small, leading them to a great land that flowed with milk and honey. Once they made it to the bank of the Jordan River, they could see the land in the distance, but they could not see the land well enough to know if it was safe to cross. that fear of the unknown. Moses sent 12 spies on a reconnaissance mission. The children of Israel waited anxiously to learn what the 12 spies discovered about their new home. After 40 days, all 12 spies returned. Israel waited with bated breath to hear their report. 10 who came back were shaken. Their faces were white as a sheet. Their knees were knocking. Numbers 13 reads, they brought back an evil, slanderous report. They talked only about giants guarding walled cities. The other 2 spies were different. They were upbeat and optimistic. They excitedly showed the people grapes so large it took 2 men just to carry one cluster. Joshua and Caleb were ready to cross the Jordan and start life in the promised land. But when Israel took their vote, they voted to believe the report of the 10, the majority, and refuse the report of the 2. Even after all the miracles they had witnessed with their own eyes, and after waiting 40 days for the report to come back, Israel decided to stay right where they were already camped. Our question for thought, if you'd like to answer this, if you had been Joshua or Caleb, how would you have tried to persuade Israel of victory, and why? I think our side of it is we got to read what happened to them afterward. We weren't there when it happened. We don't really know how we would have reacted. We could have reacted either way. I mean, I know we know of the victory later. You could have pointed to the victories they'd already been through. But they had had so much persecution. It outweighed, I guess, in their mindset, the victories, as huge as they were. They had enough years of that mindset that they didn't overcome it.
Yeah.
Numbers 14 tells us a tearful tale of a fearful people. And all the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron. And the whole congregation said unto them, would God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would God we had died in this wilderness? And wherefore hath the Lord brought us unto this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be a prey? Were it not better for us to return into Egypt? And they said one to another, let us make a captain, and let us return into Egypt. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the children of Israel. And Joshua the son of Nun, and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, which were of them that searched the land, rent their clothes. And they spake unto all the company of the children of Israel, saying, the land which we passed through to search it is an exceeding good land. If the Lord delight in us, then he will bring us into this land and give it us, a land which floweth with milk and honey. Only rebel not ye against the Lord, neither fear ye the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their defense is departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Fear them not. That was Numbers chapter 14, verses 1 through 9. They were enslaved in fear between the land from which God delivered them and the land where God was taking them. They decided they would rather live in the wilderness on bread and water than move into the promised land and have to trust God to fight battles they could not win without him. Worse yet, some even tried to turn the nation against their leaders and choose another leader who would lead them right back to bondage, right back to Egypt. Because we live over 3,000 years after Moses, we have the luxury of sitting in the film room and commenting on Israel's performance on the field. We saw what they saw, but they did not see what we see, at least not yet. They did not know how God was going to fell the giants and the walled cities. We often malign Israel for their lack of faith, and perhaps it is warranted, but many of us have done the same thing in our journey out of sin.
That's right.
That's right. How would you describe your journey of faith and spiritual growth? What are some obstacles you have faced?
Say the question again.
It says, how would you describe your journey of faith and spiritual growth? What are some obstacles you have faced?
Oh.
judgment from other people.
Yeah,
Mhm.
rejection.
Bitterness towards others as obstacles. But I mean, like for me, growing up in the church and then going out, so seeing both sides of things,
Right.
and then finally coming back and seeing that this is the way, you know, that was also an obstacle being out in the world.
Sure.
And sometimes it's too big to overcome for some people.
The knowledge that there is life outside
Mhm.
of that perimeter. And it looks good.
Looks easy.
Looks easier. Until you see the end. But you don't see it while it's happening.
Right. And that's, I mean, Israel was dealing with that same thing. They saw Egypt as being easier than what they were dealing with. They were taken care of. They had a place to live. They had food.
Right.
Even though God had given them that throughout their journey, they thought it would be easier to go back to Egypt instead of letting God take care of them. And that, you know, the fear of the unknown
Right.
and stepping out in faith and letting God take care of us is difficult to do.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. Anyone else want to comment? Jesus saved us from our sin. Jesus has saved all of us from sin. We were all born sin, shaped in iniquity. Even if you grew up in an apostolic church and your first word was revival, Jesus saved you from sin. Yes. If you grew up on the streets and spent most of your life in the bars and behind bars, Jesus saved you from sin. Jesus did not just save us from low self-esteem or a subpar lifestyle. He saved us from sin. And he did not just save us so we could have a more comfortable life. He saved us so we would have eternal life. Salvation may be free to us, but it cost Jesus his life. He wrote the rules. He could have written the rules of redemption cheaply. To redeem us, he could have given 30 pieces of silver. That would have been fair, since that is the price Judas valued Jesus. Judas sold Jesus to the men who wanted Jesus dead, but that price would not cost Jesus anything. God could mine silver from every silver mine and redeem every man, woman, boy, and girl if he wanted. But it would not cost him anything. Rather, the Apostle Peter knew how expensive salvation was to Jesus when he wrote. This is 1 Peter 1:18 and 19. Knowing that you were not redeemed with corruptible things like silver or gold, from your aimless conduct received by tradition from your fathers, but with the precious blood of Christ, as of a lamb without blemish and without spot. Jesus valued our soul higher than his own life. He died for us so we could live free from the prison of sin. Yet, like the nation of Israel, with their toes touching the touching the cool river water of the Jordan, we have been known to think about going back to the very sin from which he saved us. Salvation is certainly free, but Jesus calls us to take up our cross daily and follow him if we want to be his disciple. Matthew chapter 16, verse 24. What does it mean daily to take up your cross?
Needs to be reminded and make that commitment over again to be a Christian. Live a life that's separated wholly to God. Live a life that's where it's sacrificial to God.
Repentance every day.
Yeah.
Could it be daily a choice to live differently?
Try. And we all come to crossroads every day, multiple times a day.
Mm-hmm.
And the decision we make decides whether we're going to stay holy or go the way of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be, I mean, that's a constant battle we all fight. And so we have to make that decision to be like Jesus and take our cross and take the road that he would take, not the road that everybody else takes.
We all know somebody that's reached a point where they felt like, this is the line. I can't go past this line. I can't give up anymore. I think God allows us to see daily and not have to see all at once everything. So perhaps it's each day something that comes to mind that may have been pleasurable to go back to. For years, Jen tried to keep it together, but her drug addiction was tearing her family apart. She had been born again as a young girl, but she was losing her faith to addiction. Some Sundays she showed signs of promise. She was worshiping, praying, even responding to the preached word. Clearly the Spirit was winning this war. But the next week she was in trouble again, stealing from people she loved and people she did not even know, just to feed her addiction. The judge in her city showed her mercy time and time again, but he could show no more mercy. Jen went to prison for years. She missed birthday parties and Christmas mornings, and even one of her children's graduation. But during those years, God was reaching for her, and she reached for God. She repented and gave her life back to God in prison. Ironically, she was more free in prison than when she had been out of prison. The inmates and correctional officers saw a change in her, and so did her family. When she was released, she was a different woman than when she had been sentenced. She was better. She was free. The church was happy to have her back. Her husband and children were happy to have her back. All of heaven was happy to have her back. She was in the prayer room before service. Her worship was ablaze. She was transformed. Jen was as faithful to church as the sun is to shine. But she missed one Sunday. Maybe she was working or sick or out of town. There was no cause to press the panic button because she missed one Sunday. Then she missed another, and another, and another. Soon she was leaving home at odd hours and coming home different. She had all the signs of addiction, but no one wanted to believe she had fallen back into that same trap. Time told the tale. After being set free more than once from drugs and even from prison, Jen fell back into addiction. That addiction cost her another graduation and eventually custody of her own children. No one around her understood how she could return to a lifestyle that had robbed so much from her. But we can say the same for Israel after leaving Egypt. How could anyone suggest they return to Egypt after they were slaves for hundreds of years? It is possible to forget the sorrow sin brings after we have been set free. We tend to romanticize the good old days. Do not fall for that trap. The enemy of our soul is never kind, is not kind, and will never be kind to us. He steals, kills, and destroys. But our God came to our world to give us life more abundantly. Jesus taught us that we cannot serve two masters. We will hate one and love the other. Matthew chapter 6, verse 24. Israel was given the choice to serve a Pharaoh bent on destroying them and their children, or trusting God enough to serve him to deliver them and their children. We too will serve a master determined to destroy us and our children, or God who desires to deliver us and our children. We will not serve two masters, neither will we serve no master. Everyone will serve someone.
That's right.
What can we do as a church for people who are enslaved to sin?
Pray.
Pray.
Keep in touch with them if they miss service, or if they, if you know they're having a hard time, contact them and just, I'm thinking about you, I'm praying for you.
Be that support, that support, stay connected.
Mm-hmm.
Ask them out for dinner, fellowship.
Yeah, keep loving them despite the sin. Keep loving them, even if you can't stand what they're doing.
But as you're loving them too, giving them that example that there is light, there is hope, and it's not going to be overnight, but it does plant that seed.
Testify.
It takes time.
We are encouraged by the word of testimony.
That's right. Testify to them.
Our life itself is what is helping them.
That's right.
When we choose to make the right decision, when they see us choose to live differently from what we would have before, react differently than we would have before. A changed life is what helps them see that they can change.
Absolutely. I want to say that that we need to, as saints, and we need to continue keeping our integrity in our testimony, is that if we're going to say what we are, then we need to walk like what we're supposed to be.
That's right.
We need to have integrity. That way we don't lose our testimony. You know, because a blemish on your testimony is very hard to get back.
That's right.
So it's what we need to be, you know, be cognizant of on a daily basis is our testimony.
I'm going to make a plug for something that's absolutely unspiritual. But I think, too, I read a book about habits. It talks about forming a habit. And in order to break a habit, there has to be a breaking of the cycle. The loop has to be switched out, so to say. An alternate route. So if you can build a new habit, then that in itself, as you recreate it and you keep doing that, replaces the old habit.
21 days.
And it takes so many days, of course, for that
It takes 21 days
to form a habit, but it takes only like 3, I think, to break it.
It's about 3 times longer to break a habit than it is to make a habit.
And so, I mean, that's a great book if you need help figuring out how to work with habits. But, I mean, it's not, obviously it's not the godly thing, but if you think of it with a godly mindset, that would help. What's that? You want to share?
No, I'm talking about the subject of, depending on the habit, some are easier to break than others.
Of course. And the longer a habit is in place.
But it all begins in the mind. You know, you've got to make a decision that I'm breaking this habit.
But the renewing of your mind, Bible says we're transformed by the renewing of your mind. And that is by staying in the Holy Ghost, staying in prayer, staying in reading of the Word.
That's right.
Because that Word is life. And as it's fed to you, it's the, like you're talking about bread, it's the bread of life. That is our bread that's supposed to correct and fix the things we have going on. It will enlighten us to the things that God wants us to change in our life.
That's right.
Moving on, so I don't lose train of thought. The Lord calls us to be holy in every area of our lives. Moses and Aaron could not believe their eyes or ears. They knew the miracles God had just worked in plain sight for them. As they looked around at the people they loved, they saw despair on each face. God had defeated the most feared army in the then known world without Israel swinging one sword. But his own people did not trust him to defeat the smaller armies of smaller cities. Some of the would-be leaders were inciting panic. That is when Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before the entire nation of Israel. They were broken before the people. Israel was still wobbling as a newborn nation. Although they had celebrated hundreds of years as a nation, over 400 years of slavery stunted their growth. They were as unsteady as a toddler taking her first steps. Joshua and Caleb ripped their clothes in despair. These men had spent over a month on the other side of the river. They had seen the walled cities and giants. They had something to say that Israel needed to hear. The land which we passed through to search it is an exceeding good land. If the Lord delight in us, then he will bring us into this land and give it us, a land which flows with milk and honey. Only rebel not ye against the Lord, neither fear ye the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their defense is departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Fear them not. Numbers 14:7-9. But their rally cry fell on deaf ears. Could it be that the first word they heard out of their mouths was if? Said, if the Lord delight in us, maybe they thought after all of those years of slavery, the Lord had no delight in them, and all they could remember is what they were, or what they had been in. But their rally cry fell on deaf ears. The people started clamoring to stone them. They wanted to kill the leaders, elect another leader, and return to Egypt. God had enough. Suddenly, the glory of the Lord appeared in the tent of meeting in the sight of all the children of Israel. That was enough to stop all conversations about stoning and returning. God spoke with Moses and promised all the rebels who failed to trust God would wander in the wilderness until they all died. But not Joshua and Caleb. God rewarded them for their faith when the rest of the people were filled with doubt. Our fight is not with a neighboring nation or a superpower wanting to enslave us. Our fight is with a more sinister foe. Our fight is with sin. Since our fight is with sin, our goal is holiness. Our goal is to be like the one who fights for us. We are to be holy as he is holy. Holiness flows into every area of our lives. Holiness calls us to honesty when we would rather be dishonest. Holiness calls us to integrity when our resolve is weak and we think nobody will ever find out.
That's right.
Holiness calls us to humility when we would rather boast and brag about who we are rather than whose we are. Holiness calls us to speak in a way that glorifies God and edifies others. Any other speech that brings a reproach on God or brings others down has no place in the conversation of a Christian. Holiness calls us to be careful of what we listen to and what we watch. Holiness determines our entertainment choices. And if our entertainment choices push us farther from God, they do not need to be our entertainment choices.
Great.
It is a choice. The Bible says wait. Sometimes it's just a wait. Holiness calls us to respect our bodies as the temple of God's own Spirit, keeping our body clear of drugs or alcohol that could do irreversible harm to our body, our family, and our testimony. Holiness calls us to dress modestly in a way that draws attention to God and not to ourselves. Even if the world around us does not value modesty and the purity it preserves, modesty is still beautiful in the eyes of God.
That's right.
Modesty helps us to be good stewards of our bodies and of our finances. Modesty is not concerned with the latest fashion or societal craze. Another question for thought. How can we best instill values of modesty and purity in the younger generation?
Lead by example.
Right.
I think, too, it's a teaching of the reason why.
Yeah.
Not so much as saying, this is what we do, and that's it.
Right.
We've got to open the understanding to the reason. It's not about the rule. It's about what it's for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The protection it's for.
Right.
The closer we get to the coming of God, the more evil our generation is becoming. We're not to become more like them, we're to become more like God.
That's right.
We can't let down on our side of things just because it looks like it's still far enough away from them that maybe it doesn't matter. Because any step in the opposite direction is away from God.
That's right.
Any letdown is really excusing their mindset of, oh, we can do worse.
Well, when you're willing to take one step and
then
you
once
get comfortable,
start,
then you'll take
it's
another one, and you'll take another one.
Yeah.
And before you realize it, you look just like them.
Exactly.
Nobody can tell outside the church that you even go to church. So, I mean, why would they want what we have if they can't see a difference?
Right. So, on final thought, on internalizing this, we are not like God because we talk right, listen to the right music, wear the right clothes, and avoid drugs and alcohol. We have those disciplines and convictions because we want to be more like Jesus and heed the scriptural call to be holy as he is holy.
Right.
1 Peter 1:16. Jesus died for us to deliver us from sin. The very least we should do is live for him. And by the grace and power of God, we must choose to live free from sin. He gave all, we have to give all.
That's right.
If you are struggling with wanting to return to sin because you're disappointed or disillusioned with God, take a lesson from a people who learned the hard way. Israel forgot the horrors of being enslaved to Egypt after they had been set free. It is possible for us to forget the horrors of being enslaved to sin after we have been set free. But what will keep us grateful for our freedom and wanting to be more like our God will be the time we spend with him. We will see him as he is, and we will see sin as it is.
Yeah.
Somehow when you're looking at something, it's like that picture with the dots that you're supposed to like find a picture in that picture. But you kind of have to look away. And then when you glance back at it, you actually see the picture. If you're trying to pick sin out of a group of sin, it's all the same.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to be able to tell what's sin and what's not, because it's all sin. And you're trying to say, well, this one's this and this one's not. But you really can't tell. So you look away. You have to look at God first. And once you've seen the face of God and the holiness of God, when you look back the other way, it doesn't look the same.
That's right.
It's completely changed. Turns into what it is. Or like the pictures that you have to stare at before you see the man or the old woman or whatever it is in that picture that's hiding in that picture. That's the same thing.
Yeah.
You don't see it. It's hidden. The enemy doesn't want you to think it's sin.
That's right.
And the last thought, then we will clearly see to choose to live for him, to love him, to be like him.
Amen.
Amen.